Adopt Me is widely recognized as one of the most successful games Roblox has ever produced. Even years after its original release, it continues to pull numbers that most games on the platform could not even come close to. As of today, Adopt Me has accumulated over 40 billion visits. That is a number that puts it in an entirely different category from almost every other Roblox experience. And if you were around during 2020, you probably remember just how dominant this game was. Every major update caused massive spikes in players, and sometimes so large that Roblox servers actually had a hard time keeping up. At its peak, Adopt Me became the first Roblox game ever to reach over 1 million players online at the same time. But after that era ended, the narrative around the game changed completely. By 2021 and 2022, people started calling Adopt Me dead. Player counts were lower than ever during the pandemic, and the YouTube hype was slowing down, and players started going towards newer and other games. To a lot of players, it looked like Adopt Me had already peaked and faded away like so many Roblox games have done before. The reality though is very different. Not only did Adopt Me never actually die, but it recently has been reaching player counts it hasn't seen before in a few years. Once again, pushing towards the top of Roblox's all-time concurrent player rankings. So the question is, how does a game that's been around for so long continue to survive and even grow when most Roblox games are burning out within a few months? To understand that, you have to go all the way back to the game's release. When Adopt Me first released, it entered Roblox at a very specific moment. Before it existed, one of the most popular role-playing games on the platform was Adopt and Raise. That game was one of Roblox's earlier major success stories and proved that roleplay based games could dominate the front page. However, Adopt and Raise slowly became outdated. It suffered from, technical bug issues, lack of updates, and eventually felt abandoned. Players still loved the concept of adoption and roleplay, but they just didn't have a modern, well-supported game to play at the time. Then, Adopt Me filled that gap perfectly. It took the same core idea, but it improved it in almost every way. The game ran smoother, it looked better, and most importantly, it was developed by a team that consistently updated and expanded the game. Players could be able to roleplay, decorate homes, hang out with friends, or just use it as a social tool. It wasn't overly competitive and it appealed to a massive audience. At first, this alone was enough to make the game popular, but what turned Adopt Me into a phenomenon was how it evolved over time. The biggest turning point for Adopt Me was the introduction of pets. Once pets were added, the game stopped being just a roleplay experience, and it became something players can truly invest their time into. Players could hatch eggs, age pets, and complete tasks while collecting rarer animals, and this created a long-term gameplay loop. Players weren't just logging in to roleplay for a few minutes, instead they were staying on the game and grinding for hours and hours. Then, the game introduced trading. Trading completely transformed Adopt Me. Pets were no longer just cosmetic companions, but instead they became assets and they held value. Limited time pets were dropping, there were event exclusives, and there were ultra rare animals that created an economy that rewarded dedication and long-term play. This is where Adopt Me separated itself from most Roblox games. Instead of resetting progress every update or making old items useless, Adopt Me allowed value to carry forward. Pets from a few years ago could still be relevant, rare, and highly sought after. That means that players who invested their time early on were still being rewarded. This was a system that encouraged people to stay connected to the game for years and years. When 2020 hit and millions of players were suddenly stuck at home, Adopt Me was perfectly positioned. The game already had depth, consistency, and an active economy. As a result, it didn't just grow, but it exploded. Another major factor in Adopt Me's rise was the decline of other role-playing games, especially Meep City. Meep City was once one of the biggest games in Roblox, but over time it became surrounded by controversy, lack of updates, and a growing community backlash. As Meep City lost players, many of them looked for an alternative game that offered social interaction without having the same problems. Adopt Me became the first obvious choice. It was newer, better maintained, and more appealing to both younger players and long-term Roblox users. As Meep City was declining, Adopt Me absorbed all of the player base and it strengthened its position even more. By the end of 2020, Adopt Me wasn't just popular, it was untouchable. Then the pandemic ended. Schools reopened, schedules were getting back to normal, and players had less time to go online. Like almost every other Roblox game that benefited from the pandemic, Adopt Me's player count just dropped. This is where many people assume the game was dying, but if you actually look at the numbers, Adopt Me never collapsed. Even during its low periods, the game constantly held tens of thousands concurrent players and sometimes exceeded over 100,000 players online at once for years straight. That alone would qualify as one of the most successful games on Roblox and in Roblox history. More importantly, the developers never stopped updating the game. Seasonal events continued, new pets were added regularly, and the trading economy remained active. Players who had pets from earlier years suddenly found themselves owning valuable items that the new players wanted. This created a natural reason to return to the game even after the long breaks. Unlike many other Roblox games that rely entirely on hype cycles, Adopt Me relied on retention. In more recent years, Adopt Me introduced features specifically designed to reward returning players. There was offline progression, daily streaks, long-running events, and these encouraged players to log in every day even if they weren't going to grind for hours. Holiday events, especially winter and Christmas updates, they played a huge role in the game's resurgence. These events offered limited time pets and rewards, and that immediately became valuable in the trading economy. Players didn't want to miss out, and this led to massive spikes in activity. As a result, the game's player charts began trending upwards again. Higher peaks, stronger averages, and a momentum that hasn't been seen in years. What's important here is that this growth wasn't random. It was built on systems that existed for a long time. Systems that rewarded people for their time, effort, and consistency. Another reason Adopt Me has stayed relevant is how it approaches monetization. It isn't heavily pay to win. Players that don't want to spend Robux and just want to earn stuff for free can still grind, trade, and build value over time. Robux can speed things up, but it doesn't completely remove effort, and this balance is what is important. In many other Roblox games, players who don't spend Robux are locked out of progression. Adopt Me avoids that trap by keeping trading and long-term value accessible to everyone. Even with those risks, Adopt Me stands apart from most Roblox games. Very few experiences on the platform have lasted this long while maintaining relevance, active development, and a strong community. Most games have a spike, they decline, and then they disappear forever, but Adopt Me, it adapts and it stabilizes and continues. It may not appeal to everyone, it may not dominate the front page forever, but its longevity alone makes it one of the most important and successful games in Roblox history. The fact that it still has active player counts even after years of its peak says more than any viral trend could ever. So I want to hear from you guys. Do you still play Adopt Me? Did you quit and come back? Or do you just watch from a distance and wonder how it's still going? If you haven't played the game in a long time, I highly recommend, just hopping on and giving it another try. But yeah, let me know what you think down below in the comments. Thanks for watching. This was MoneyRBLX. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this, and take care.